Well, a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to the channel or welcome back. My name is Anna, and of course, I put together the content for this video, which is just really a sharing of information. Sometimes I do a script, sometimes I don't. Today, I've got a tentative script. And for these reasons, I do put timing stamps. If you're new to the channel, you won't know this. I'm just letting you know in advance. I put timing stamps in the descriptions of all of my videos in case I go on a waffle or a tangent. I have to actually, at this point in time, do an apology and say, look, I think this video is going to be a bit long today, so you might want to pay attention to the timing stamps. And this is because I have been slack. So my apologies to you right from the get-go that actually I haven't loaded my videos on the last 2 Sundays. I've had a little bit of stuff going on, not in a bad way, just really affecting my time management and basically goal completion. So it's not a bad thing for me. I just have not stuck to my tasks and my scheduling. So for that, I apologize if there are people that are waiting on specific information when I do these videos. I should get back on track with it. I'm hoping to get my time management better over the next week or two. In the meantime, just a little bit of advance notice, because it has been 2 weeks since I have done the videos. There's a couple of subjects that I want to touch on. Some of it is the relationship stuff and boundaries within relationships, and just part of understanding who you are, what you are, why you're doing it, or why we take certain actions. And that's based on my social work and mental health training. Other stuff is to do with, it's a response to one of the people that have put a comment underneath a video. I'll get to that in a little while. Plus, there's been lots happening in regard to the crystals. And then I've got the event coming up, which actually, because I'm recording this now on Tuesday, it means that our local event is happening tomorrow night. So I've got a bit of information there that I will add to shortly. Now, before I get into the content, though, for today, I will actually stick to the routine to some level and focus on gratitude as the first part of the video today. And this is because I feel gratitude is just such an important part of life. And, you know, if you're into energy at all, you know that from a logical, from a metaphysical perspective, energetically, the more grateful we are for the things around us, the more we actually magnetically attract them to our aura. And so we experience more things to be grateful for. If you want to be practical and earthy about it, just ask yourself, you know, who do you want to be around? Who do you enjoy spending company with? Do you enjoy spending company with those people that lighten and brighten your day, that are positive? Or do you want to be around somebody that is basically ungrateful, entitled, and just whinges relentlessly? And I think it stands to reason that we can see physically why we want to be around people that have a greater sense of gratitude just within their approach to life. So for this week, not specifically actually this week, so I've got to be honest, I did this slide last week. It was supposed to be loaded not this Sunday, the Sunday before, and at that time, because we have had such a long winter, and I think the longer that winter goes on, this is very unusual for us here in Australia, particularly in Perth. We still have had rain, you know, so we had a pocket of glorious sunshine, glorious blue skies, and hardly any cloud cover in it. And it just was absolutely such a relief. And because we had this beautiful day, it made me realize, you know, because I was sitting outside about 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was wonderful. And I realized that the weather really impacts on my mood. And when it drags out with this cold, dreary weather or overcast, it definitely has an impact on my attitude and emotional state. So anyway, this particular day, I just happened to look up in this sky, and I saw, I don't have an actual photograph. This is not my photograph. This is a stock one that I pinched from somewhere. But either way, I saw an eagle in the sky. Now, I love eagles, absolutely love them. They're just amazing to watch when they soar. Just, you know, watching their wingspan and all the rest of it. Anyway, I recall I had a moment of gratitude and a moment of reflection where a guy that had come to Australia, he was from Ireland, and he had made the decision, apparently came over on holiday, and we were talking about the skies here in Australia, where I said, that when it comes to the poor weather, one of the reasons I don't cope with being in the Northern Hemisphere is largely because of the weather, and because I've been privileged enough to grow up in environments where there's these wide open spaces, and that includes the sky, so we have stunning starry night skies, shall we say. And anyway, I said when I lived in the UK, I actually felt deprived because I couldn't see the stars, and I started to feel that I was suffocating because there was not this broad expanse that I'd grown up with. Well, anyway, the guy that I was talking to from Ireland, he basically said it was actually our skies that had made him decide to immigrate. He'd come over on a holiday, and he said that's not to say that he doesn't appreciate the skies in Ireland, because he said, but they are so vastly different to what we have in Australia. He said, in Ireland it's really beautiful. He said, and some days it felt like if you just put your hand out, you could touch the sky, which is beyond my imagination, by the way, being in these vast ones. Whereas from his perspective, when you're in Australia and you look at our blue skies on those blue sky days, and thankfully we have more of them than, well, where I live and where I've always lived, we've had more of those than these skies where the clouds are really low. And I think it helps to put you into perspective as far as your ego goes, because you realize, when you've got these vast open spaces, that at the end of the day, all each one of us is just a dot on the horizon, and we're just one of many. So I think it's very helpful for just getting that perspective, just having that ego and that sense of, we can be confident with who and what we are, but there's no need to delude ourselves that we're superior than other people, I guess. But anyway, I'm grateful for my environment that I live in and the capacity to be able to see these wonderful miracles of life and nature. The dog's decided he wants to squeak his toy. Sorry about that. And the things that we see in nature, we quite often take for granted. It wasn't until I went overseas that I realised not everybody has the opportunity to see dolphins playing in the ocean, or to see a whale. You go down the beach and you just happen to see the whales on their migration travels. I grew up being surrounded by these kind of things, not on an everyday basis, but enough for me to sort of feel it to be normal, and to not have that seems abnormal, or to not have access to that. So it just helps to put things into perspective, I guess. So where I'm going with this is I'm very grateful for my environment. Now, with this next slide, what I'm doing is leading into my response to a person by the name of, who uses the handle of Fuzzy, who had written a comment underneath the Healer's Gold video, and talking about the fact that they were going to be doing counselling, and that they were intending to use bracelets I think they said they were using bracelets as part of keeping their boundary protection. So what I've done here is not so much to talk up myself, because that's not the intention. The intention is to show how crystals can actually be really effective for self-care and part of that self-nurturing, and particularly when we work in what we call in Australia the fields of human services, and maybe overseas they call it care and support roles. And so I did this work before I started my studies of Bachelor of Social Work, and before I started the Masters of Counselling. And I was working with people that were what we would call in industry multiple and complex trauma. If we wanted to be less formal, we could turn around and say they were really living at the pointy end of life with a lot of pain and suffering and challenges that most people couldn't even begin to imagine. So what I've done to try and make this effective was to outline how to engage with people to start with, where you can actually help them to lift themselves above their problems. And I always found honesty was the best policy, which was being straightforward with my limitations of, I'm not sure how to handle this, but what can I do? You know what I mean? So the other thing is I always want to be practical and helpful to the people that I worked with. I should have clarified, this was actually a housing support role, and my role was to go into basically the housing clients and who are at risk of actually being evicted from their properties. And what you tend to find, so to put this into perspective, is what you find is people with lots and lots of problems tend to start to become neglectful or negligent of the properties that they're living in. And it can be because they're depressed, or it can be for a number of reasons. It doesn't mean that the people are somehow inadequate or that there's something wrong with them, that they can't actually sustain their tenancies. It just means that sometimes, and this is where my job was, that I would go along, find out what was going wrong with them, and support them to get their life sorted out so that they could manage their responsibilities. And of course, there was no real training for this, I've got to say. I was thrown in at the deep end myself. And the types of problems that people were living through really was an eye-opener. I thought that I had problems, and I actually did at the time. I had a lot of problems, that the types of problems that my clients had made me actually grateful for the problems that I had, which seemed to be pretty trivial compared to what they were living through. So I'm going to paint a little bit of a scenario here for you, particularly for Philo Fuzzy, so that she can, and I'm presuming it's a she, can understand just how effective I found the crystals, and I'll name them in a moment, for what I used and how I managed it. And the first part, as much as I've put these points up here on the slide, the first thing is that no house that I went into looked like we've got in this image here. It was more like the stuff was piled to the ceiling. Hoarding and cluttering was a huge problem. The walls could be filthy, they could be smashed in, it could be anything going on, and I had to go in there and help them. Nothing about it was sweet and pretty. So it was a very much a case of me going in and just being honest with people. Well, the normal approach was to say, look, okay, I'm here to help you sustain your tenancy. I need to understand what's going wrong. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to anything else. I just need to know what's going on for you. And of course, where there's been trauma, people are very distrustful, and many people have been let down by agencies because of their criteria. And I can honestly say that probably the biggest problem that I had working in this area, shall we say, was not my client base, interestingly. It was actually things like management and management policies, which I felt were in contrast to being a caring profession. But anyway, with the clients and these types of stories, if you're an empathetic person, there is often this belief, and where you go and you speak to people, you hear their horrible stories, and they are horrible. Okay, if you're one of those people, those horrible stories, I'm sorry, I probably should call it a dark story. But where we can actually take that on board ourselves, and until we learn to manage it. So what I found initially was that there were some clients I would go home and I would start stressing about what they were going through, because I knew that they were good people at heart, but I also recognized that they were very limited and they lacked capacity a lot of the time to deal with the problems and not to compound their problems. So anyway, I'll give you a scenario of one client, and I was sent to her because the property was being damaged. Long story short, there was an extended family member that continued to break into their house, and if she locked the windows and doors, they would kick them in, and they were there obviously to steal money and possessions and that kind of stuff, because there was a substance abuse problem. So that's my point for presentation when I go and see her and I find out, okay, she's just given up replacing the windows and the doors because she's low income, she doesn't work, and she's already replaced the windows 3 times or whatever, and so now she figures, waste of time, he's just going to come and kick them in anyway. The problem was compounded by the fact that she and her partner had got into a domestic dispute. By the way, she's an older woman, had got into a domestic dispute over this particular relative. Now, this story didn't come out, just so that you know, all in the first meeting. This came out in dribs and drabs. Anyway, there had been a situation of violence, and really apparently quite bad towards her, and required hospitalisation. So police were involved, restraining orders were put in place. Housing said that the man couldn't come to the property again. This was causing her enormous distress. So just to be clear here, right, putting this into perspective, I'm just telling you another person's story. This particular lady, what she said to me, because I was concerned, of course, that she was at risk of further harm if the man turned up at a property. And she said, no, she said, because what happened after that night, it was extremely traumatic, what led up to the incident between them, and it involved the person that was breaking into the house. But she said he didn't have a history of being violent with her. He just lost it that night. And what compounded it for her was the fact that actually after the incident where she was hospitalised, he also was hospitalised because he had a stroke. And it was in the process of treating him that they recognised that he actually had dementia. And he also had a very limited time span. So from her position, she felt that the health issues had been the cause of the violence. And not only that, she wanted him to come home so that she could nurse him. She was concerned that, her belief was she didn't feel unsafe for him to come back because he actually was on a walking frame by that stage. He couldn't walk and he was so significantly ill. It was a case of nursing him until he passed away. Look, we can take different perspectives about that story just in itself. In the case of, unconditional love towards him. She'd been with the man for about 30 years. From her perspective, yes, he was violent, but she was able to put that in perspective and see that, she was able to, I don't want to justify violence. I'm just doing that from her position. He was no longer a risk. He'd never been a risk in the past. It was a one-off. It was just pretty ugly. And she wanted to look after him until he passed away. So that became a case of, for me, I had to do some advocacy for her. There's so many, her situation was so complex because it took me probably about 3 or 4 months to get the full story out for her. So I'm just giving you parts of it here. But one of the other things, there was a day I turned up and just to see how she was going. She'd gone missing and housing was concerned that she'd abandoned the place. But anyway, I happened to drive past and see she was home. So I just dropped in off the cuff and she was a mess. She was a mess. Her son had taken his life and anyway, long story short, I won't go too much into that. I will just say that I got the news when I met her and all I did was just, I don't know what to say to you. You know what I mean? I don't know what to say to that beyond the fact that it must be horrendous. And do you mind if I sit with you for a while? And so basically we just sat together in the house for about 2 hours. And in the course of me sitting there, and it wasn't total silence because we both just sat there. And then every now and again, I might turn around and ask a question along the lines of, I remember one of them, which is like, do you mind if I ask you why you've got a dressing table in the lounge room that looks like it's been smashed up with a sledgehammer? And no judgment on that, by the way, but I thought she'll have a reason for this. And she did. And she said, look, I came back, I've got no money, I've got no firewood. She said, and it was freezing and, I burned some of it. I was like, okay. So then it was a case of, well, okay, do you have money for firewood now? What can I do to help you, to at least self-care? And just things like that, But I mean, before I move on to the next slide of how I managed to work with these people, because apparently it was fed back to me by other people that the fact that I actually was able to engage them in the first point was apparently credible or whatever. But the other thing too, I guess, was the fact that I could interact with these people and hear their stories and not have it affect my function. And it was only in the early days that I had those boundary issues with worrying about my clients when I got home. But I want to end this story on a note, because this day that was absolutely horrendous for this woman, where we sat around quietly, I watched a cat walk into the house. Oh, I mean, in between learning that her canary had died on the perch because it froze overnight, but whatever. We're sitting there and this cat walks in and I said, oh, you've got yourself a cat. And she just looked at it. She said, no, I haven't got myself a cat. She said, this cat just walked in because the door's broken. And she said, and you wouldn't believe it. She said, she's walked in behind my chair and had a litter of kittens. She said, so I now not only have one stray cat, I've actually got 5, right? So anyway, that at least we were able to have a bit of a laugh and a smile within these horrendous dark time that she was going through. So now my managing strategies, which I hope Phil Fuzzy will be able to perhaps find beneficial at least. So the first thing I guess to outline is that actually before I do all of this stuff, that you see on the screen, I actually am into angels. So I used to do invocation, and I also used to call upon Archangel Michael to shield my aura, things like that. So that was basically a daily occurrence for me, in and out. And of course, there is spiritual hygiene, which I often talk about. So I would make sure I did that stuff as well. But anyway, my daily routine included, I didn't have healer's gold back then. So what I used to wear was tourmaline bracelets, because I understood that tourmaline was very good for absorbing negativity, which of course it is. At some point in time, and it probably was once I recognized that I was taking on board the client issues and stressing when I got home, I learned about Tibetan Tektite being a good boundary protector. So I recall that with the Tibetan Tektite, I used to wear it as a pendant, and when I bought it, it wasn't super expensive, and I could only buy it in lots of, I think, about 7 or 8. So in fact, I ended up giving a lot of Tibetan Tektite as pendants to other people, and I had the cord that I used to hang it on. Right now, I'm going to talk about Tibetan Tektite in a moment as well, because my day would be, as I walked out of that house, I would put my bracelets on, my pendant would go on. Cactus quartz, I think I used to use in the office and have it by my computer, because a lot of my client base also had people that had passed away under extreme circumstances, and some people might refer to them as lost souls, or souls that haven't gone to the light. And because, of course, I'm susceptible to spirit and you know what I mean? I call them the people that body's floating into my whatever personal zone. So cactus quartz is actually really good for keeping your aura free of attachments, okay? So I think I used to put that at my desk. The other thing is too, that if I started to feel that there was an energy compromise or a gap in my aura, then I would work with the white or the blue light and follow up with a shield or a circle of rust color around my aura. The selenite, the relevance for that is that I didn't wear it when I was going to work. What I used to do was, when I got home from work, that Tibetan Tektite pendant, that was ripped off, okay? And sometimes if it was a particularly busy day with lots and lots of stuff happening, I would actually get into the car, and before I drove home, I would just do a little breathing activity to clear and purify my aura before I took off down the road. And sometimes that meant that the bracelets and the pendant would come off in the car, so that when I walked through the door, because the home where I was living was about 20 minutes away from work. But if I hadn't done it before I got in the door, they would be off the moment I came through my door at home, and they would be hung on. I have a selenite tower, a lamp with 3 points, and I actually had another one back then as well, which had the flat top. But either way, my jewelry that I wore for boundary protection would go on those as soon as I came in the door. And the other thing that I might do on the drive home was where I talk about attitude and responsibilities. I had family problems, I had my own children with issues, and I was trying to manage those problems with the dramas that the work folk had, my workplace clients had. And so what I had was an ethos, if you like, more so than an attitude, which was that everybody I interacted with deserved to have the best of me, and that I should endeavour to be as present as I could be with whoever I was interacting with. And if that was my workplace clients, they deserved 100% of my support at that time. And when I got home, I needed to be giving my children 100% of who I am. Obviously, I wasn't married at the time, but if I had a partner, it would be my family. I need to be committed, present, and responsive to what is going on at home. And the other thing is, I needed to make sure that I looked after my own health and well-being as well. And so besides all of these activities, the other thing that I used to do was regularly give myself a soak in the bathtub. And with my bath, you've got to laugh about this, I'm just sharing some self-help strategies with you. I used to have lavender bubble bath. I would fill the bath up. I would put in a clear quartz point. I would put in rose quartz, and I would put in Petalite as well, because these are all wonderful crystals for helping to really balance out and calm your energy. So that's my self-care stuff, okay? Nowadays, of course, what would I do differently? Well, I don't have tourmaline bracelets anymore. They've broken. So I definitely would be looking at using the healer's gold when I'm doing any sessions with people. I don't have the Tibetan tektite anymore either. So what would I wear as a pendant? Probably something blue, maybe some sodalite or something like that. Cactus quartz I still have, except that I have it on my desk at home now. I'm looking at it as I talk to you. Just a tip with people, what I've seen with the cactus quartz is that it's being sold like 1 point. Now we call those fingers, right? Or we did back in the day. My little cluster is 4 points, right? And so that would be 4 fingers. Now you've got to have the finger pointing at you because it brings the energy in through the back and then out through the point towards you. So mine is pointing directly at me. So the other topic that I want to talk about today is something that many of us have to deal with and address in our day-to-day life, and it's about the choices that we make and the amount of sharing of information that we make, and becoming this recognition that whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, each day does offer a potential for peace, happiness and joy, and that the only thing that really is going to interrupt our internal peace is actually how we respond to our environment and the people and events, the situations we find ourselves in. And by that, I'm referring to a specific example that was brought to my attention in a phone call, actually, with somebody that I'm quite close to that was having difficulty navigating a situation which is actually referred to, and this is going back to my counselling training, if you like, and it's got to do with what we call triangulation. And what I tend to find is when people that are close to me, my friends and family, start talking about the problems that they have or that they're addressing, especially when they're relationship ones, I actually am always loath to express an opinion or my own beliefs, because that would be a transfer and projection of what I think and believe. So what I tend to do is actually talk about my training and what we are informed of as part of our training, and I just share information across that way. So the dilemma that somebody close to me was experiencing is, as I said, it's called triangulation. Now, in regard to triangulation, we call it triangulation because it usually involves 3 people, but you will know of scenarios in yourself for when it's triangulation. Well, actually, all right, so let's put this into perspective. So triangulation tends to occur, this is the theory of it, when you've got 2 people that are experiencing what is called relationship tension. We would call that, in mainstream walking about life, 2 people are having a blue, they're having a bit of an argument, they've got a disagreement happening, and one of those 2 people in that partnership, whether it's an intimate partnership or whether it's 2 of your girlfriends, have had a bit of a fight, and then they come and approach you and they tell you what's happened from their perspective, and their motivation is going to be different depending on the scenario, but it's called triangulation because you've got the 3 people involved. And this is one of the reasons why I picked this image, because I think it's actually great to represent it. Now, just touching on triangulation, there's going to be a couple of scenarios as to why the relationship becomes triangulated, and it's up to you to determine which one's appropriate or which one is relevant to the situation you find yourself in. So sometimes it's going to be because they want support around processing what's happened, what happened, why did it happen, what did they do, what they might be able to do in future to avoid these types of conflicts, because quite often conflict occurs because there's been a communication breakdown. Now, this kind of approach to triangulation is one that's empowering, okay, because it's helping that person to be a better and bigger person. Other times people are triangulating, they go to that 3rd person, might be you, because they want validation. They want reassurance that their emotional response is perfectly normal. They're okay. The problem's not them. The problem is the other person. That's not necessarily empowering. it is when they are open to hearing, actually, I think you overreacted, or perhaps you misinterpreted, okay, and they're open to hearing that criticism, then that becomes empowering, because they can look at themselves and then realize they overreacted and go back to the person and say, look, you know what, I'm really sorry about that. I misinterpreted what you said, and you're an important friend to me, and I want to maintain the friendship. So let's talk about this, and I apologize for my part, that kind of thing. That's empowering. Other times they might just want to get support around managing the other person's difficult behavior, especially if we're talking about power and control issues that are going on within that partnership. And that might be, a husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, that kind of thing, where it's an intimate partnership. And there is, one person's trying to dictate to the other one what they should and shouldn't do, and the person that's coming to you is saying, well, I don't want to be dictated to, so they might want to get some strategy there. So the point being that each one of these motives and incentives for triangulation actually can be very difficult to manage if you're that person being approached, and if you don't have any formal training on how to support this person, because you're looking at specific skill sets here to help that person or the person that's coming to you. And not everybody's got training to be qualified to give impartial, unbiased information to a person to manage these difficulties. Now, I would go a step further, because obviously I do have training in it, but even if a person came to me as a friend to tell me these sorts of problems, and you've got relationship triangulation happening, because they're my friend, I would also feel particularly uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, I'm not their counsellor, and that becomes a bit of a boundary cross. And that's probably why I don't turn around and say to them, well, actually, if people want to use me as a counsellor, I just turn around and say to them, there is a professional boundary here. The bottom line is, if I'm going to be your counsellor, I can't be your friend. Okay, that's a crossing of the line. So I can tell you as a friend what a counsellor might say to you, but if you want to have this ongoing support, because these are skills that we develop, then you need to probably get some professional help there, and leave me to be your friend, basically. But anyway, moving on with triangulation. So I guess as a friend, there is an understanding of triangulation that is necessary, okay? And it can actually be really tense for the friends as well. So I'm thinking of this specific person that was dragged into triangulation and trying to dig their way out of it. And the problem is, if the motive for triangulation is questionable, which is just about having sympathy and what some people might call validation, is that business of, oh, you poor thing, it must be awful, I'd be so upset too if it was me. That kind of stuff is a good friend that can do that. However, the reality is that as a friend, it's going to be difficult to sustain it if the person is not actively doing anything to manage the situation themselves. And a good friend, this of course is my position, would be one that would turn around and say to them, which is, well, so what's going on for you? This scenario has happened, and you're telling me that you feel sad, or you're telling me you feel bad, or whatever. Well, what is it that you're actually upset about it? Because there is that, like, name and tame the emotion. If you can name it, then you understand it better. And then it becomes a case of, well, what can you do about it? I'm unhappy. What can we do? Do we go back and talk to that person? Do we recognise that actually that person is who they are and they're not going to change, and respect for differences? Do we need to leave the situation? Do we need to work on the situation? These are things that only the person involved in that partnership is going to be able to answer, but they've got to work through it to find their solutions. Now, if the situation is about power and control, I put a comment here. As I say, I do rough transcripts. When there is power and control issues, generally speaking, it's not going to end well unless a person is willing to overcome their control issues, for example. Or it might be a case of that you've got somebody that is conditioned to be submissive to another powerful person, and they go through life feeling like a victim. So both people need to work on that. So perhaps that's relationship counselling. Now, if you're the person that's being approached as the third wheel within these problems, there's a couple of reasons why you don't actually want to buy into that conflict. And that is because it can create conflict for you, which is exactly what happened to the person that I was talking to. They thought that they were being supportive. The person expressed that they were very unhappy within a relationship. Without being invited to, they shared private SMSs, which were quite toxic, and apparently aired the fact that, you know, all their friends are telling them the same thing, which is basically end the relationship, which begs the question, why do you need to go and tell all your friends that your relationship's not working and get their opinion before you make a decision? That in itself is questionable. But going back to this particular scenario, the person I was speaking to said that they attempted to basically be impartial and empowering, shall we say. Their response to getting this information was one of basically that quiet response of like, oh, that sounds awful. Why are you letting this person say this to you? You know what I mean? Didn't tell them what to do. Just ask the question for that person to go away and reflect on, why are they having these boundaries with this person where they allow them to step all over them? Anyway, where that came back to bite the person, an innocent question, was that the other part of the relationship basically got in a massive tiff, was obviously quite irate because we'll call it the triangulator, the person that initiated the breach out of the partnership and over to the person I know, right, has then in the course of an argument gone back to what they consider to be the offender and turned around and said, well, I've spoken to all my friends and they said blah, blah, blah. And this person I spoke to, which was a friend of both parties, has said to me that I should split up with you. Something like that, right? So then the other person has gone, hang on a moment, who do they think they are telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing? They are not being a friend to me, etc. So it then creates another wing of the triangle, shall we say, of conflict and animosity and acrimony. And then the person that was basically the innocent bystander is then dragged right in the midst of the conflict and is now experiencing conflict themselves. Now, I'll make the point here before I move on to the next slide that what you're hearing here, if you're hearing about me talking to a person who you may as well say is a victim of triangulation, has then come to me and shared information. So what we now see is the triangle has expanded. It's no longer simply a matter between three people. You've got four people brainstorming a particular relationship conflict. But of course, I've mentioned the fact that the person that has created the triangulation is actually drawing a lot of people into the situation by telling all of her friends. Now, what I would be suggesting at this point in time is clearly the person's got a lot of problems, but there is also the reminder, and this is what I said to my friend, that they needed to, well, actually that's not something a counsellor would say. I'd be very wary of anybody that actually has to do all of this sharing of the relationship where they're speaking of it to everyone about how they're a victim, okay? And especially when there's an expectation that the people that they're drawing into it take an action. Now, this is because part of my training includes the knowledge and understanding that some people walk their path in life as what we call splitters, and they will put wedges in healthy relationships because they are actually the ones that have got the control issue. They're seeking to control the behaviour of the person in their intimate partnered relationship, shall we say. And part of that is to separate and split them from their supports. And just to be clear about this, when we're talking about this kind of behavior, we're actually talking about narcissists and psychopaths, okay? A lot of people think psychopaths are like Silence of the Lamb, but no, they're not all like that. They just don't have a conscience. They're very self-serving, and meeting their needs takes priority over everybody else's. So how do you manage this? That's the answer that the person I was talking to was seeking to find. How do we manage this when this is obviously a boundary issue between, we'll call it the triangulator and the third party. The third party is now having their comfort levels impacted rather negatively. They want that they want the triangulator to stop including them in their dramas. They don't want to hurt the person, they don't want to let the person down, but they know they absolutely cannot deal with all this conflict that is coming at them from now two directions when they're not even part of the conflict. They've now been drawn into the conflict. And anyway, so that is basically a boundary cross big time. So the person, I'm trying to think of the word. Okay, so the third party actually needs to put the line in the sand with the triangulator and basically be honest, which is, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm sorry that life is difficult for you. However, at this point in time, I would rather that you don't speak to me about this situation because it's causing conflict for me. The reality is you don't actually have to justify this. And this is actually what I did mention to the third party. There's a couple of different approaches. If you really care about that person and you want to keep them in, you may decide that you will actually justify and explain your reasons for drawing that line in the sand. Or alternatively, if you're not quite as invested in sustaining that relationship, you can be straight up and turn around and say, look, I value your friendship. However, this friendship is actually going to be really quite compromised if we keep discussing this situation. So can we make an agreement? This is apparently what ended up happening. Can we make an agreement that we don't talk about your relationship with X right now because I can't manage it? Simple as, whatever words feel comfortable to you. The problem being in the particular scenario that I'm talking about is that the triangulator has done the yes, look, that's fine. I totally understand that. And then within a couple of hours or a day or whatever, they have actually given more stuff via SMS or message to the third party, dragging them back into it. So what's happened is that actually, because they can't respect a boundary, that they are now pushed back in their own situation. But you've got to do what's right and healthy for you. In this particular scenario, just to be clear, I already knew, as did the third party, that the triangulator actually has access to services and is actively seeing a therapist. And so therefore, with another person, if they don't have supports there, I might perhaps encourage greater sensitivity, shall we say, depending on the person's mental health state. But in this scenario, it was okay to actually just be direct and straight up, because I understand that the person has a psychologist or therapist on tap. If they get a bit traumatized, they can phone up, or if they're upset, they can just call that counsellor and get in and basically get an immediate response, which is, you want to know that if they're deeply disturbed. And if you've got a therapist or a counsellor or some kind of professional mental health support, and even a really good spiritual advisor that has got training in counselling at least, they will be able to work through with the person to understand what they are doing. They're triangulating through this third wheel approach, and to reflect on their motives and what is it that they're intending to have happen by doing this sharing of information. Are they trying to create this circle of sympathy and support of poor me, so they can play out that role of being a victim? Or are they actively seeking support and help? And are they realistic in their expectations of support and help? One example I can think of just off the cuff, not related to this one, is perhaps where an adult in a relationship with another adult, obviously, feels that the adult child is being obnoxious, and then they will approach the adult child's parent going, this is what your son or your daughter has done. what are you going to do about it? Well, actually, what the adult parent is going to do is absolutely nothing, because their child is an adult. And in most instances, adults do not listen to their parents. They've gone beyond that point of parental discipline. I mean, a parent can perhaps try and have a conversation, but don't count on them to be able to make a difference. That would be the bottom line. And the other thing is too, if they can see a therapist or somebody that's impartial to the situation, that person is able to actively support the triangulator to work through and process, is their behavior they need to change? What have they done within the situation? And they may not have done anything, by the way. They may actually, rightly so or fairly so, be the victim of another person's malice. But at the end of the day, a therapist will help them, I would like to think, a good one, will help them come to the realisation, actually, they are right. They are in an unhealthy situation, but it is time to make a change. And how are they going to make that change? How are they going to get themselves into a healthy situation and environment, bearing in mind that none of us control other people, okay? We can't change people. People have to want to change themselves. A lot of the time in partnered relationships, women tend to, I say women, I'm being a bit gender thing here, but then at the end of the day, I can only really speak from a woman's perspective, is that we will tend to stay in a relationship longer because we are hoping that a person will change. Well, the reality is hope is not based always on reality, not when our hope is based on other people. So hoping that they will change doesn't make a change. Laying down a healthy boundary may promote change. It may encourage that person to change their behaviour, but you can't build all your faith and hope in the fact that a person might change. They have to be able to sustain it as well. I'm just thinking out loud and deviating from my transcript here that what I would think is a good sign is if a person turned around and laid down that boundary to their partner, going out of the triangulation and back to a partnership, where the person can turn around and say, look, I'm not comfortable when you do X and Y. And in fact, I'm so uncomfortable with it, I actually am considering my options at the moment and whether or not I need to be starting out again as a solo person. At which point the other person gets choices where they can turn around and say, well, good idea, or, you know what, actually, no, I don't want that to happen. I want to see us stay together. What can I do for us to stay together? And I think probably I would be saying, let's go to relationship counselling, because it's not that people can't change simply because their partner has asked them, but it's kind of like if you bring in a qualified third wheel and go and see a counsellor, it kind of helps to set the goals and to assess progress and that kind of thing, and to make healthy decision making. Certainly, at least after 12 months or whatever, you would set a time frame on what you're going to do. But anyway, they're just some thoughts that I thought I would share with you today, because these seem to be problems that come up fairly regularly for most of us at different times in different ways. Remember, everybody's situation is a little bit different, because we're all unique. We're all individuals. We're all unique, but we've got similar traits a lot of the time. We're all people. Right, so that's said and done. Picking up the pace here and getting back on track. For those that are interested, as far as the web development, if I can speak, web development and the progress report goes, yeah, look, it's happening. It's still happening slowly, of course, because, hey, that's how I've been rolling the last couple of weeks. Difficulty focusing and getting stuff done. But it is most definitely underway, and I have done some more work. If you go to the chakra page on the website, you'll see that while the page is still under development and it's still happening, I've actually updated it to include the current information. I've done the heart chakra. Today, hopefully by the time this loaded, I will have the brow and crown stuff finished at least, because I've started on it. And what I'm trying to do is just do the update each time I finish a section so that I don't lose it. And therefore, you will be able to see the progress as it happens more readily. It is coming together. It's just a slow progress. And when I talk about the chakras, of course, you've got the other secondary chakras. And when it comes to the secondary chakras, that's really my personal information more so than anything else. And this, I think, to be straight up with you, is because of the clairvoyance and because I've done healing work. So I see things, and I mean, when it comes to those, and I'm talking about the Bindu chakra, the Kundalini chakra, just straight off the get-go, and I can't remember what the other one's called at the moment. I'm having a mind blank. But look, either way, that's through working and using with the chakras and having some level of clairvoyance. And that doesn't mean to say that I've got all the knowledge that you could possibly have about it, but I have been doing some research on it, and this is why I've got a few delays. And that is straight off, for example, straight off the get-go, if you look at the images I've got up, the Bindu chakra I associate with black and white, but I also know as you work with it and you open it that the little white dot actually becomes red. So that has been my experience of working with it. The thing is, though, that when I did some Googling on it, because I thought, oh, how am I going to explain this stuff to people? You know, it's more about the use of language and words to convey a message that people can understand when it comes to using this chakra. And anyway, suffice to say, what I found was information that is either in conflict with my understanding of the way that chakra works, as a prime example, and also the colours. So where I've got it as black and white, I've seen that other people associate it with a very dark purple. But anyway, talking about back to this stuff here, the throat chakra, I think I may have just about completed that if I haven't completed it. I know that I'm just working on the brow and the crown stuff now, and the other chakras such as the Kundalini. This one's going to be difficult for me to actually explain, I think, unless I do some serious meditation and try and communicate and channel and download information. But my experience of the Kundalini chakra has actually been where I felt it before I even knew that it existed. And because of my experience with the Kundalini chakra, that helped me to process the information that I got to get the deeper understanding of the chakra from a chakra perspective. Kundalini energy, of course, is centered in the Kundalini chakra. And I do Kundalini Reiki as well. And when I am channeling and doing readings, I will also channel Kundalini Reiki, if that makes sense, or Kundalini energy. I might have to do a separate video just on that one to help people understand it a bit better and to help me to articulate it in ways that are meaningful to you. So talking about the page revamps, I've actually taken the chakra content off this slide here because it's very close to being completed. Even if the content is actually not up on the website, I've actually done drafts and I've just got to proof and edit it and that kind of thing before I load it onto the website. I will actually have that dedicated. Once that's up, it'll be such a relief because then I can go, right, here's how you do the spiritual hygiene, here's how you do the centering and grounding, a little bit more information to be done on that, and of course the sacred breathing, sacred breath. So, okay, now we get to the local community gathering, the event, which is happening tomorrow night at Mount Lawley, Beaufort Street Community Centre. Preferably you'll get a ticket online. You can go to Eventbrite. Actually, they will be closed off probably by the time this is loaded. If you want to attend and it's too late to get a ticket, message me through the website. Okay, I've got a contact form and they will come through to me and I'll check them out. Anyway, I have got heaps of crystals to bring along to that. I like to bring them out so that people can take a look at them, just so that you know, if you do attend the events, you can purchase crystals from me. And I do offer discount to people that attend the events. And also, if you've got cash, I offer a larger discount, just saying, because it makes life easier for me. Anyway, types of crystals. I was having a conversation. If you've been before, you'll know Kerry. I was having a chat with Kerry today and I said, oh my goodness me. I said, I've got so many crystals now, but I'm thinking I'm just going to put it out to you guys. If you want me to bring a specific crystal type for you to take a look at, then let me know, because actually it just gets too heavy, and my back and shoulders and all the rest of it, lugging these rocks around, really, it can become a bit heavy. But anyway, so crystals that I've got come in, since the last event, just thinking about it, is yes, I've got the Seraphinite. Now, if you're Australian, you'll probably know what a tombola is. It's a marble, it's a type of marble, big one. Anyway, they're about the size of a tombola. Now, just to be clear, Seraphinite is really rare. It's very expensive. But so where I'm going with this is these tombola marbles are not cheap, but they are actually really super quality. And for the price point, right, for what they are priced very reasonably for Seraphinite. Okay, so I've got them at what I consider to be a good price, and I check out Seraphinite all the time. So anyway, I'll take a couple of those along so that if people are interested, I did promise somebody last time I would take them along. But of course, I've got to say, when I get stuff like that, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, that's for me. That one's got my name on it. All right. So I've got one of them. I've also got Mystic Merlinite spheres have arrived, and palm stones. Once again, at a very good price. I finally got my Kambamba Jasper palm stones. Once again, if I can get them at a good price, I'll grab them. I also got some African emerald spheres, which are really quite stunning. And I did get some red garnet in the rough, almondine garnet. If you haven't used that before, I didn't realise what its properties were. I was drawn to it when I was going to university. And so when I was doing my study, I was always wearing these red garnet bracelets, which I can no longer find. I also got the celestite clusters. They've arrived. And they look really, really good. And there's another one, the orca agate that I got. Oh my God, it's so good. Absolutely stunning. And once again, I got it at a very good price, which means that I can sell this product to people and sell it, I think, at a very competitive rate, which is just wonderful. But anyway, the orca agate, once again, that was a case of I've opened it up because it's free form, and I've looked at it and I'm like, oh, I've got to have that piece, right? And then I've looked at another piece. Oh, no, I think I've got to have that piece, right? Because it actually is really, really nice. But either way, I thought, look, I can't keep all of them. I'll just have to do a lucky dip on them. I did a lucky dip myself, put my hand in, pulled out a piece, and I was like, right, this is mine. The rest I've got to sell. I've got to do the right thing. So these are the other new arrivals that I've got come in. I have got some lovely iolite tumbles. I managed to get them at a really good price as well. So it's very unusual. Is it unusual or is it just lucky? But either way, I've got about 2 kilograms of the iolite tumble stones. As I mentioned, I've got the Mystic Merlinite, blue lace agate I haven't talked about. So blue lace agate was one of the first crystals that I ever bought for myself and I was drawn to. And back in the day, I thought I was just drawn to it because it was pretty. And I used to have it a pendant around my neck on a gold chain and I wore it for years. Anyway, story being that I didn't know really what its properties were. And back in the day, the relevance to me for the blue lace agate was actually because it was apparently recommended for people with thyroid conditions, which of course that's one of my health issues, Hashimoto's actually. So anyway, where I'm going with this is I've been looking at blue lace agate for a while and it is so expensive. It has become so rare. It used to be very affordable, but now it's really expensive. Anyway, I managed to get a supplier of the tumbles. Now, I will say I've got them on my desk. They're not as far as the tumbled stones go, it's a real mixed bag. I got them for a very good price. They're a bit on the pale side. Some of them have got the beautiful blue that I would like, but at the same time, they're perfectly good for metaphysical work if that's what you're doing. And as I've said before, you don't have to have a perfect specimen for metaphysical purposes. Some of these blue lace agate have a little bit of brown. Now, I've got to admit that I'm a little bit, I'm reminded of my old mentor where he turned around and he said that my problem was I always went for gem quality because I was like, why is it everything I look at is the most expensive? And he said, that's because you've got an eye for quality, you know, and you see the best and you want the best, which is quite true. I do agree with that because I love colours. So when I look at the blue lace agate I've got here, I can tell you straight away it's not A grade, but it's perfectly good grade. Some of it's got a little bit of the brown, some of it's got a little bit of the outer crust. You could probably hear me rattling around with the bag there. And when I was looking at it, my initial reaction was, well, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. But the reality is, I didn't pay top dollar for this, right? I've managed to get this at a very good rate. And for me to expect to have top quality for the price I paid is just absolutely ludicrous. I can say that I've seen wholesale blue lace agate going for about 250, even 300 US dollars for the polished crystals, the polished tumble stones, and I won't buy it for that. That's just, by the time you do your currency conversions, it's totally unreasonable. Plus, who would buy the tumbles? You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. Now, the other thing, so having said that, yeah, this is still quite good for anybody that's into blue lace agate. I forgot to mention, I also got blue lace agate rough, and that arrived before my tumbled stones did. And that rough is actually really good quality. And because I didn't have the tumbles and I was wanting to work on my verbal expression for when I'm doing these videos, I actually went and got one of these lovely caves and I've put it on the desk, right, where I'm sitting. And I've got to say, it is stunning. I probably should have taken a photograph of it. But either way, what I noticed is I have been completely off with the fairies for about the last 10 days for the time frame that I've had this blue lace agate there. I didn't realise. It's only when I've been doing the videos that I came to realise that blue lace agate is apparently very high vibration, and it really does. I would say that's potentially why, because I was using the blue lace agate, that's potentially why I developed myself, shall we say, as quickly as I did back in year 2000 to be able to access the guides and to do the higher realm stuff, because I definitely need to ground myself at the moment to get myself back on track. So I've got some tourmaline coming. Oh, and I haven't put that on the slide. The tourmaline should arrive soon. So other crystals that have arrived or are coming. Oh, I've got a little piece of choroid, which I will use to show people, but that's mine. I'm keeping that. And I've only got one because it was out of stock. I bought the last one. I've got garnet sunstone palm stones for people. That's a stunning crystal. They're quite affordable as well. With the almandine garnet, I do have the rough. I think they're called tetrahedrons. They're an unusual shape. They're not particularly pretty, I've got to say, because they're not polished. They are rough and they naturally form as tetrahedrons, if I've got the right hedron happening. But they're certainly very grounding crystals. I've got Tai Chi stone coming. I've got spiderweb jasper on its way. And also I've got 2 kilograms of the rainbow moonstone in the rough, and the one that I really, really love, and I'm not sure I'm going to be pronouncing this correctly, but I think it's called Cheyenne Jade. I've got 2 5-kilogram Buddha heads that have come out. They're absolutely stunning. I don't have photos of those yet either. And then I've got about 6 of the lemon jade Buddhas, and they're a kilo each, and they're all very nice as well. So I might, because it's too hard to carry all of these crystals down to the crystal events, what I'm going to do is take some photographs of the Buddhas, for example, and then if people want, I can bring them along to the next event, or alternatively, if they want to buy one, they can come by and take a look at them here at my home. Just to be clear though, so in case people aren't aware, that Cheyenne jade and the lemon jade, that's actually a mismarketing label, all right, because I did my Googling on it and I thought, for the prices that we're paying, it cannot possibly be jade. And what I learned was that actually Cheyenne jade is primarily white serpentine, okay, and the lemon jade is serpentine as well, but it's got more of a lemon type hue, a lemon green type colour, so it probably should be called lime. But I'm just, because I'm being honest about the product, it's called jade. It's not jade. It's serpentine, but it's lovely, just saying. So I just saw how long this video is, so I'm going to whip through the rest of it now and just really speed up, okay, because I know time is an issue, and also it'll take me forever to load this. Okay, as far as the Crystal Magic playlist goes and the update, yep, okay, I've fallen behind, so let's whip through it. The Apophyllite video is up. I don't have any Apophyllite on me at the moment. It's not part of my crystal collection. Hopefully it's not that far away. Honey Calcite video is up. I do have Honey Calcite as part of my collection, and I mentioned this in the video. I also have some Honey Calcite coming. It's up there as one of my yummy, yummy love crystals. A wonderful crystal. Anyway, I've also got some Honey Calcite coming that is in the rough, raw calcite. Danburite video is up, another one of my faves, but not part of my collection. But you know, with things like this, if it's not part of my collection, I'm opening to hearing where I can find a supplier that does wholesale rates, okay? Because obviously I want to be able to, the crystals that I use and recommend, I'd like to be able to make available to other people and basically go middleman and sell them. Same with the Petalite, that video is up, but I actually don't have a piece of that, so I'm open to finding a supplier of Petalite as well. Mystic Merlinite was supposed to go up today, but honestly, by the time I load this video, I will finish the Mystic Merlinite, and I will look to load that on Friday, I think, or maybe Thursday. It'll go up Thursday or Friday. So I'll do the crystal videos for this week on Thursday and Friday because, of course, I've fallen behind with the yarning. Just to be clear, when we look at this image here, it really is not pretty and it doesn't do justice to this particular stone. I'm tempted to actually enhance the colour on this to make it look more realistic, but that would feel a bit dishonest, so I'm not going to. But suffice to say, look, it's pretty purple, purple with the black, and probably a lavender type purple colour. I think some people call that indigo, but if it's indigo, I call that a pale indigo. But either way, it's a very interesting colour, and I've got one piece that I'm keeping for me. So the plan this week also includes loading the video for Tai Chi stone, which is one that is new to my world, right? I'd never heard of it before, and I saw it for sale through one of the wholesalers. So I had a bit of a look at it, and I thought, you know what, it's so different, I'm going to grab some. And I will do a video about it because obviously if I'm going to have it, I need to be able to tell people what's it about and that kind of thing. I can tell at a glance, so you know, but I just want to expand on that. So anyway, that video will be this week as well. So at this point in time, if you've made it this far, I'm just going to say, look, thanks very much. Congratulations. Well done you. Honestly, especially if you sat through every slide, which I don't expect you to. I will say for now, though, that's all the information I've got to share with you today. I'm really sorry that I didn't do the videos over the last couple of weeks, the yarning, and I will make more of an effort to get my time management sorted out over the next week or so. Until next time, though, I'm going to say, look, love you, leave you, take care. Catch you on the next video. Hopefully, if you're local, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night. Let me know if you want to attend and you haven't got a ticket. Bye-bye for now.